Hi, I'm Snow Sultan, and I thought I would post a short video that shows my Photoshop postwork layers for a simple test scene I made recently. My old videos, they were just too long and rambling, so I'm hoping this one will be more to the point and perhaps give you some ideas on how you can improve your raw renders. I'm not going to be showing the individual settings for each adjustment because they will be completely different depending on your scene and your lighting and the look that you're trying to achieve. So let's get started. Here's the original DAZ Studio render imported into Photoshop. It's pretty dark, but I've actually found it easier to postwork darker renders than very bright ones. Sometimes details can be washed out permanently in very bright renders, but they're usually still intact and just waiting to be brought out in darker ones like this one. I could be mistaken, of course. That's just what I've noticed through my own experiments. The first thing I did was to convert it to smart filters and apply a camera raw filter to adjust the brightness, the contrast, the highlights, the shadows, and the sharpness. We'll show that right here. You can make most of your color and brightness adjustments this way, and it's easy to go back and change them as you work if you find that necessary. Next, I applied a hair mask that I made using a product available at DAZ called Mask and Multi-Pass Toolbox. And I used a hue saturation layer to make the hair less bright and to better fit in with the rest of the scene. I will turn that on here. It's on, off, on. I don't really have time in this video to explain the rather complicated process I came up with to use that mask making script with iRay because it's really designed only for use with 3D light. But I will consider making a video for it at a later date. I then added a curve to give the whole scene a little bit more of a bluish, colder dungeon look. Here it is, on, off, on. For this next step, I did some dodging on the figure skin to lighten it up. Let's see here, on, off, on. And then I loaded a mask for the background, and I applied a Gaussian blur to blur the background a bit to simulate depth of field. That's on, off, on. Here I used one of the smoke brushes from Ron over at DAZ, and I used the little tutorial that comes with it to make the torch flame. We'll turn that on, and off, and on. And I did a little bit of masking and a little bit of blurring just to make it fit into the scene. And for this, I loaded a mask of the chains here and applied a curve, but to be honest, it might look better the way it was before. That's on, off, on. In the next step, I made a new layer and I painted some highlights on some of the shiny parts of her outfit. We'll turn that on. You can see it's mostly on the gold areas here, the chains. It's off, on. Next, I masked the figure again, and I used a large soft brush to paint some subtle edge lighting. You can see it. It is kind of hard to see, but you can see it under the arms and on the hip. We will turn it off, on. I often find it easier just to paint edge lighting where you want it rather than trying to get a rear spotlight to only shine where you want it to. A lot of times, like in this case, it's just easier to paint it yourself. Okay, next on the fixes layer, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit to better show this. That's where I spent some time cleaning up some of the blemishes on her face, fixing the eyes and the mouth. We'll turn that on, off, on. And we'll zoom out again. And on this light rays layer, I just made some brush strokes with a large brush to make some light, added some little particles in there and blurred it a bit. So that's on, off, on. Here I added another curves layer to bring back some of the warm coloring. On, off, on. And finally I loaded a background mask and created a brightness contrast layer, and then I painted the mask in order to darken the right wall. I'll turn this on. You can see it's darker, off, on, and then all that's left is to stamp it, which is basically to flatten it to a new layer. And on PC we use Shift Control Alt E. Then I added a signature just down here at the bottom, and then you're done. You can see that all these little steps can really add up to change what was a pretty dark and boring original render into something that I hope is slightly more interesting. So I hope that was helpful. Thank you very much for watching this, and I hope you enjoy my art, and I hope you'll come back for future tutorials. Take care and stay safe.